Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, which will be considering an application for a new premises licence for Bournemouth Sevens Limited. The procedure for today's hearing can be found on page 3 of the agenda. In order to assist with the process this evening, I must ask everyone to ensure their mobile phones are either switched off or on silent mode. We would be grateful if you would remain quiet whilst the meeting is in progress. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be filmed by the Council and broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the chamber, it is possible the cameras will capture your image. By your presence, you are deemed to consent to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The chairman of the meeting can, at their discretion, terminate or suspend filming if, in their opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings of the meeting, or if they consider that continued filming might infringe the rights of any individual or breach any statutory provision. Finally, there are no planned fire drills for this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately via the emergency exit just over there or through the doors you came through. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
There are no apologies for absence.
In that case, we'll go on to the second item, which is election of chairman. Can I have a proposer, please?
Happy to propose Councillor Liesl-Smith.
I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could take a vote on that. I think that's unanimous. We will then go on to item 3. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
No declarations of interest. Then we will go on to item 4, procedure for hearing and withdrawal of representation.
Chairman, as you said, the proceedings are published on page 3 of the agenda at the bottom, and there are no withdrawals of representations.
In that case, we should go into number 5, which is the application for the new premises licence, Bournemouth Sevens Limited, Chapelgate, Christchurch.
Thank you, Chairman. The application is shown as Appendix 1, and it's actually applying to sell alcohol, hold regulated entertainment and provide late night refreshment during an annual Bournemouth Sevens festival, which is held at Bournemouth Sports Club, Chapelgate, East Parley, Christchurch. The application is a new premises licence for a new premises licence, although, as you know, Chairman, the festival was already permitted and regulated under an existing premises licence, and I've shown that as Appendix 2 for you. The law does allow a premises to hold more than one licence, but nevertheless the applicant licensees accept that if this application is granted, one of the licences will be subsequently surrendered. The festival's been running since 2008. The sporting theme of the festival is seven-a-side rugby, but netball and other sports also take place. Members will recall that the Licensing Act 2003 does not regulate outside sporting events, and therefore the sporting element of the festival could take place without the need of any licence from the council as the licensing authority. So the festival is held between Friday and Monday on one occasion each calendar year between May and June. The original licence limited the number of persons permitted to attend to 9,999. And on 25th of November 2013, the licensing subcommittee heard and granted an application to increase the capacity of the premises to 14,999. The application before members now is to further increase the capacity to 19,999. It would seem reasonable to take into account evidence relating to previous Rugby Sevens festivals and the effectiveness of the current terms and restrictions. I've actually gone through the conditions proposed in the application and compared it with the current conditions Basically, if I've missed anything, I'll ask Mr. Day to pick up on his presentation, but it seems to me that in addition to increasing the capacity, the second paragraph on page 24 seems to be the only minor changes, which seems to be introducing the use of tills for the logging, the refusal of alcohol sales, and maybe Mr. Day will pick that up in his presentation. I'm also aware to talk you through changes to the plan as well. So apart from that, there seems no main changes. So I think it's fair to say the main change is the increase in capacity. What you'll be considering today, as you know through your training, is the ability of the licensees to host the festival without breaching any of the licensing objectives, and not, for example, whether an increase in capacity is considered necessary. Representations must be based on the likely effect that the grant of the license would have on the licensing objectives, and they're listed and explained in paragraph 3 on page 6 for you. Appendices 3 and 4, which I think begin on page 43, Chairman, are representations received from Herne and West Parley parish councils. Appendix 5 are representations from 3 other persons in the wording of the legislation. The applicants via Mr. Day has provided you with an extra addendum, which you have copies of, and Mr. Day will present that to you during his presentation. The members, you should only base your considerations tonight on the information laid before you, either in this report or brought out during this hearing. Clearly, if you consider the granting of the licence would not jeopardise any of the licensing objectives, it should be granted in full as submitted. It's what the law dictates to you. This would include conditions being attached based on the operating schedule as contained within section M of the application shown as Appendix 1. Now, you could choose to impose extra conditions as you think fit, or make amendments to the operating schedule, conditions and or proposed hours, etc. This may or may not include the reduction in the maximum number of attendees requested. I would recommend that there's no supporting evidence to refuse to specify the nominated person as the designated premises supervisor. And clearly, if it concludes that no number of conditions would ensure that all of the licensing objectives would be upheld, then only then would the whole application be rejected. I know that copies of the Council Statement of Licensing Policy and the Section 182 guidance are made available for you, and we ask people making representations if there's anything specific in those documents to bring it to the members' attention for their consideration. Chairman, the officers are happy that all the statutory requirements have been met in the receipt of this application, and therefore content for the subcommittee to consider it in the light of the representations received, and to start the hearing by considering the objections received, unless you have any questions for myself.
Any questions to the officer?
Just, I couldn't see in the paper. Is this for 2018's festival, or 2019?
The licence would take immediate effect, basically, so there are no renewal of these licences, so they remain indefinite unless an application for review were to come in, and then, you know, it's a dynamic licence under this Act, yeah.
I have a question myself. It's probably a technical one, you may not be able to answer. The licence they're looking for is for 19,999 people. Does that include the people working there, or just the people who buy tickets?
Yeah, that will be everybody on site, basically. The numbers are very much dictated to by the fees, which is a prescribed sliding scale.
Any further questions? Okay, in that case, we'll go on to the responsible authorities and other persons' cases. Councillor Phipps, are you going to go first?
Looks that way.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm here tonight representing Herne Parish Council. First, I'd like to say I find it a bit unfortunate that both Herne and Parley parishes find themselves here again, speaking at a licensing committee, and again, asking you to consider nuisance to the residents of Christchurch. Last time in 2013, the committee felt unable to assist us and granted a licence for 5,000 extra people at this event. So, here we are again with an application for a further 5,000. Now, I note this is a new application which should be considered afresh and on its own merits. If granted also, it's stated that the applicant will surrender its previous licence, so I'm sure hopefully that will happen. In relation to the licensing objectives, the main issue for Herne is under the heading Prevention of Public Nuisance. That nuisance being a weekend of noise, in particular late at night and into the small hours. I note that the Council's statement of licensing policy mentions the need for there to be a balance between the needs of the applicant and the needs of residents and other users of the local area. And it seems to me there can be no balance if this is granted, and the scales just keep being tipped off balance every time there's an increase in the numbers for this event. 2008, 10,000. 2013, 15,000. And now another request to increase to 20,000. So where is the balance? Of course, the organisers will say it's not a problem, but common sense says the more people, the more problems and more noise. To say that less people means less noise, which I did note had been commented in one of the appendices here, quite frankly, I believe is ridiculous. So the organisers will say they'll manage the noise. And of course, they have the regulatory and standard noise management plan, which they put forward. But I put it to you that due to the location of the event, the amount of noise is always weather and wind related. And managing the weather, and therefore the noise, is impossible. You can't put that in the plan. Both the applicants and I believe our environmental health officer, because he said it to me, I'm sure, will admit that the noise nuisance from this event will affect an area or several surrounding areas at some time during the weekend. It always does. If you're a recipient of the noise, you can expect bass banging, you know, the thump, thump, thump for hours on end until well after midnight on one or both nights of the event. Could it be said that the balance had been met when there were 10,000 visitors? Or perhaps the balance was met when it was increased to 15,000, and now you're asked to approve 20,000. So I ask again, what is the balance, please? Can someone tell me, or will we be back here in a few years' time with an application for 25,000 or 30,000? Surely this does have to stop somewhere. I read with interest the comments from others in the appendix, both residents and a previous participant. And even the participant states, I do think the organisers need to put more of a focus into the sports than the drink tents, and that when she lived in Muscliffe, she could hear the noise, the music noise from there. And it is a fact, as stated in the Herne Parish Council letter, this event is heard not only in Herne, but Parley, St Leonard's, St Ives, St Catherine's, and in Muscliffe in Bournemouth, on the other side of the river, depending on the weather. The sports are not a problem, and of course are supported by the Parish Council. Sports is where this event hangs its hat for its licence. But the evening music festival is a problem, and that's where the Parish Council objection lies. More people, Drinking and dancing to loud music in an outdoor open area will cause more noise. It's just common sense. So I ask the committee to leave the balance of this event as it is now, at 15,000 people. A public noise nuisance already exists with this event, in my opinion. Please don't make it worse by increasing the numbers. You've heard from the officer that a condition or conditions would make no difference. So I ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'd like to hear from Councillor Manuel.
Chairman, thank you very much for allowing me to address you on this fact. And I represent West Parley as a parish councillor, but I'm here not only on behalf of the parish council, but on behalf of all the residents of West Parley. Over the years, the Bournemouth Sport Club have attempted to build on what was purely a rugby festival to making it a music festival with a sporting element. By increasing the numbers once again, it's attempting to become a fully fledged music festival with all that it entails. Although this event is sited within the Christchurch Borough Council area, the impact is largely felt in West Parley, who suffer vandalism and unacceptable noise levels due to an influx of revellers, alcohol infused, which is currently 5 times the population of West Parley. This inevitably increases the probability of an increase in crime and disorder, public safety and public nuisance, which are the licensing objectives. I appreciate sporting events do not need a licence, but by increasing the numbers of attendees, who in the main are attending solely for the evening music entertainment, will undoubtedly increase all areas of concern. It is generally known fact that the crossroads in West Parley are the most congested in the conurbation, and to increase the number of attendees will further increase the amount of traffic into the area. Apart from the noise, which carries on into the small hours, residents live on the main roads have to batten down the hatches to safeguard their properties, and it is not unknown to find festival goers using residents' gardens as urinals. Parley takes pride in its village, and the amount of litter left around the village is not acceptable. In previous years, trees planted on verges have been ripped apart by revellers making their way home. It is rather sad that residents of West Parley are inclined to pray for bad weather and winds blowing in the opposite direction over the weekend of the event. West Parley Parish Council have been in discussion with the sports club over the years and once again have received assurances that all their concerns will be addressed. However, the parish would only consider a temporary licence in view of the increase in numbers, but I appreciate this is not an option for the committee. I would therefore urge the committee to refuse this application, as I do not think the key licensing objectives can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go on to item 3, which is the applicant's case.
Hi, thank you. I'm Philip Day. I'm a solicitor with Lacey's in Bournemouth, and I've acted for the applicant for a number of years, including back in 2003, which was the last occasion we were here. Sitting next to me in the same order as on your schedule is Craig Matthew, who's now Managing Director, Roger Woodall, who conceived this event in the first place and is effectively the owner and obviously another director, and Paul Ashurst, who is relatively new to the team as one of the event organisers. Now, before I go any further, I just want to make sure, please, that you have had and have had an opportunity to look through and read papers that were submitted just over a week ago. So you should have my response to the representations. I'm not going to read that out. I would be insulting you if I did. But I just want to draw your attention very quickly to some of the annexes. First, as tends to be my practice always, when you have an application, even the most straightforward ones, always go to the responsible authorities in advance before putting in the application, if at all possible, to say to them, look, this is what we're thinking of doing on an informal basis. We'd like to consult with you. What do you think? In this case, we went a bit further because, as you will see from the first appendix, a response came back from a gentleman called Nicholas Cox. Nick Cox is a senior EHO with Bournemouth and therefore responsible for the Muscliffe area, where historically there have been occasions where there have been noise complaints. So we asked him what he thought about, and you can see there his response. The department have no immediate concerns. Most impact will be localised and will not fundamentally change the NMP, which is the noise management plan. And you can see on the following 2 pages what he was told about the application. The email went out to any number of other people, including the parish councils and so on. But Mr. Cox was the only one who, other than the parish councils, who came back with anything at all. We did have conversations with the police who indicated to me that they were not intending to make representations. And it may be that you will think it appropriate to attach a great deal of weight to the fact that none of the responsible authorities, none of your officers, or indeed officers from other authorities, or indeed elsewhere, like the traffic people, the ambulance people and so on and so forth, have seen fit to make any representation whatsoever. You've heard and you'll have seen representations about crime and disorder and so on. Now that always causes me a bit of a difficulty, unless ironically the police actually object, because if the police actually object or make a representation, you can say to them, well, we need to see your evidence, please. Can you show us the figures, show us the trends, show us the effect on it? Well, as they didn't make any representation, I simply can't get that information. And the best that we could do was to let you have a copy of an email that came after last year's event from Chief Inspector Richard Bell, who was the Silver Commander. In practical terms, Silver Commander means the person from the police who's in charge during the event. Gold Commander only steps in if something horrible goes wrong, like an airplane crashes off the end of the runway or something like that halfway through it, and so on. And you'll see there that he says that early indications are this year will be our lowest level for crime and antisocial behaviour, which is good news given the high attendance and warm weather. 2 factors that you would expect might have an impact, which all goes to show that there isn't a direct correlation between the numbers of people who are attending and levels of crime and antisocial behaviour. It's really all about how the event is managed and controlled and so on and so forth. Going back, as far as Herne is concerned, as you'll have seen from the representation that I put in, or response rather, there are a series of meetings that take place every year with the Safety Advisory Group, collection of different officers from different bodies who look through this monumental document, the Event Management Plan. I hope that none of you resorted to reading all of that as a cure to insomnia. But it is discussed at great length, and although they're not on the list of responsible authorities, parish councils are always invited. West Parley, as you will probably have gathered from the written representation was made, has been actively engaged and involved. But Herne, for whatever reason, this isn't a criticism, have been less active, if I can put it that way. Back in 2015, we were told that there weren't any issues. Very pleased that we missed the noise this year, but of course, unfortunately for them, others got it. But no objections, even any representations from environmental health officers, etc. I've then given you extracts of the relevant bits from the event management plan, particularly relating to the points that have been raised about litter. and things like that, because the event management plan effectively forms part of the license. It is a document, or rather a series of documents that it's a living document. It evolves all of the time, so that if somebody says, well, actually there is a problem, something has changed, then this document needs to address it. But then the event has to take place in accordance with this document, which is of course scrutinised and so on and so forth. So there are various things like determining the number of litter pickers, for example, that you wouldn't want to put in as a condition in a licence, because you're then stuck with it. Whereas in the event management plan, that can be reviewed and revised every year, or in fact is looked at on a number of occasions. The minute one event finishes, there's what we call a wash-up meeting. If there are lessons to be learned, they're picked up then, and then you move forward. Can I make the point that this is a draft, because there are certain aspects of it that it would have been somewhat presumptuous to have written and completed on the basis that you would grant this application as requested. It's wait and see what your decision is, and then to take that into account. A couple of things just to illustrate the point. It's sometimes said about events such as this, and I'll say there's another big event that takes place annually in Dorset, which is the Steam Fair, and I have the privilege of acting for them as well. And again, you hear this assertion, well, it's a beer and music festival, it's not a Steam Fair. Well, this is a rugby and other sports festival, and of course, because you have people staying, there is entertainment and there is drinking and food, come to that, to entertain them in the evening. But the fact that this is a sporting event has been acknowledged twice in the last year. They've been given awards, and you've got photographs of them there, for the best non-music festival from the UK events, beating all manner of food festivals, including the Manchester Food Festival, to get that award. And then the National Outdoor Events Association award for the sporting event of the year, again against stiff competition. And they're now finalists and looking forward to the 28th of February, when the Event Production Awards take place in London. And I'm pleased to say that they've been shortlisted for that as well. One thing that you don't appear to have in your agenda pack is this thing, which is a plan of the site. The plan like that is a bit meaningless, so I'm grateful to Google Earth for having actually overflown the festival on the Friday last year. Is the bank holidays, the late May bank holiday weekend that it always takes place, and this was taken at some point on the Friday afternoon. And I thought that it would be helpful to put this up. There is another one which is in more detail that I'll come to in a minute, but just so that you can familiarise yourselves, and I'm sure you know the area, that is the end of the runway, with the perimeter road coming from Herne off to our right, up to the roundabout that has been rebuilt, and I think they're in the process of resurfacing it again, and then the event site itself. Now, the area that is fully licensed basically goes on a line across there, around this bit, and as far as there, and across there, down here, round that field, and back up again. Right? Now, that's the main licensed area, and I'll show you a blown up one of that in a moment. We also have within the area, at the moment, this bit here. That is hockey and netball. That is the reserved camping, the posh camping, the glamping sites, most expensive tickets. The happy campers are basically in that field. Originally, the parking was all here, but as you will know, they've now built the go-kart track there. And so alternative arrangements have been made. And the arrangements last year was that they have an agreement to use both of these fields for parking. Last year, as you can just about see, that there were some cars parked in there on the Friday afternoon. They used that field and didn't use this one at all for parking. Now this year, they're going to do things slightly differently. And the reason for that is that as part and parcel of the layout changes with regard to the junction and the improvements that have been made, there is now an entrance into this field from there. Now, the bulk of, not all, but the bulk of people who drive to the event, they used to have to come up here, round the roundabout, in here, and park in this area. That was the main car park with some overflow parking in that one, which at other times of the year is used for grazing. It's a paddock with horses in it. Now, what we can do is send everybody straight in at that point. There is a pedestrian crossing, which is here, sorry, just there. So the people shepherded across the road in one go, straight into the event site, which includes this field. There's a security point here, another one up here, and then they come into the event, and all of this is all fenced off, obviously, and the main ticket box is there. No tickets available on the day. They're all pre-sold, and last year they stopped selling them a fortnight before the event, so they knew exactly how many tickets they had sold. And then that's the sports club and so on. Whilst I've still got this one on, I just want to point out one other little thing. Reference has been made to parking next to the equestrian centre. That is not the equestrian centre, that's the garden centre. The equestrian centre is down here. It transpires that what has happened in previous years is that some taxi drivers coming up from Herne have pulled in here and dropped off here for some reason, probably because they didn't want to go up and round the roundabout, and particularly into the main taxi drop-off point, which takes people in there. Been dropping people off there, who have then been walking all the way around the end of the runway and then into the site through that entrance. We've identified that as being a problem, and part and parcel of the security plan now is to put somebody down here to keep an eye on what's going on there, and to encourage anybody who does get out of a taxi or out of a car at that point to go straight round, and ideally encourage them to actually go up and park in the car park and drop off properly. But if there is an issue, then we can only think it's down here. But nobody from the equestrian centre, nobody riding horses or anything, has ever reported any issue or any problem. So to be perfectly honest, we don't entirely understand that. For what it's worth, this is all pretty secure. 2 or 3 years ago, we did have an issue with some people, a very small number, going cross country, muddy boots and so on, and coming in through a gap in the fence up here. So that's been blocked off and security's been put there. Last year, and to be perfectly honest, heaven knows what route they actually took. But one or two people managed to get through the top here and in. Now, well, it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, even Glastonbury, people still manage to jump that fence, even though it's, I don't know how high it is, half a mile high, and dogs in the middle and everything else. But there it is. So just to blow that up a bit, if I may, this is the same picture, but it's just a bit bigger. So down here you have the sports club itself. That's the stand for the rugby. This is the main pitch. This is the VIP area, and this is the V. Very, very important people and players changing and so on and so forth onto the main pitch. You have that's the main beer tent. That's entertainment, and then this area here is the main area where the crowds congregate. That along there is a bank where people sit, stand and watch what's going on the main field. But don't forget that there are actually lots and lots of other fields, including those up there and these, and sorry, not down there, and here, including one that I've mentioned in my representation, which is pitch 8, which is now going to be the venue for the frisbee. But there is, in fact, a fair amount of room around here for the various dodgeball and so on, which all takes place in there. And the new sport, which does not need a great deal of space, will also go into that area. These are catering units and so on and so forth that all go with it. To give you some sort of flavour, and you've seen these, but we'll just show you quickly some pictures. That's the army team, isn't it?
It is,
yeah, playing 7-a-side. For those of you not familiar with 7-a-side, these are very short matches. They're not on the pitch for an hour and a half, and they will play. I mean, it's basically 14 minutes, and then another game. So they get through a huge number of games of rugby during the course of the weekend. And of course, there are different tournaments, but a number of them work on the basis of you have group stages, a bit like the World Cup in football. So you have group stages where everybody plays, and then the winner of the group, or the top 2 in the group, depending on exactly which cup or plate it is, will go through to the final rounds, sometimes on the same day, sometimes on the second day. So of course, as these tournaments progress, different fields become freed up for other things. So what you can do, and they've done it now for this year, particularly with the netball, is that they've reduced the number of 2-day netball tournaments and brought in more 1-days, so that the entire tournament can be completed on the Saturday, and then you can have a different lot of tournaments on the Sunday, so you can increase the number of games, you can increase the number of participants without having to do anything at all in terms of the amount of field space or pitch space that you need. This one you probably noticed in the picture, the big orange or red tent. Well, that's there. This was a high-rise crane, and that's looking down towards the main beer tent. The other pitches there, and then food concessions and so on. And that's taken during the day. Not everybody takes it as seriously as other people do, so there is a fair bit of fun. Some ladies having fun playing netball and cheating. One of the winners of one of the plate tournaments. Hockey, as you know, being played. A bit more rugby for you. And then that is a sort of general shot looking over the hockey and netball pitches, with the glamping area that you saw on the aerial Google shot, and then the camping back here as well. And I'll come back to that briefly in a moment. But just to give you an idea of what is going on, that one is probably better with the lights down a bit. That was taken at dusk, which is just about the busiest time of the day there, because you've got everybody who's been there during the day not quite ready to go home yet, and you have got people who have come on from the campsites, and yes, you do get a number of people, but it's not a significant number, who just come for the evening entertainment and so on and so forth. In my representation, I made some comments about this. In terms of festivals and events, this isn't a music festival. They don't have named acts. Given the number of attendees that they have, the budget for the music entertainment is, I mean, it's a lot of money, but it is a small fraction of what other people will pay to get named acts and so on. There's, to all intents and purposes, no live music here. There's live music on the licence because there's always been a bit of an argument that if you have a DJ who's not just playing a record and introducing it, but doing the whizzy things that I don't understand for one, then that counts as a performance, and it's a live music performance and so on. But if you think you're going to see some well-known band that's in the charts, then it's not going to happen. This is the dodgeball, which is really quite a small little inflatable thing that you can put anywhere, and you can bring more than one in. Dodgeball competitions are men, ladies, mixed. The idea is that you throw the ball at the other players and they try and dodge out of the way, hence dodgeball. That's another shot of the area during the day. You can see here that the main pitch where all the finals are played and so on is in use. You can see people on the bank there, and others gathered around this area. And part of the reason they're gathered around that area is because there are live screens that are put up so that people can just sit on the grass in between playing their games and watch the live action that is normally being shown from the main pitch, but elsewhere as well, and a bit of other entertainment as you can see. And again, just to give you a flavour, the vast majority of people in that photograph are sportsmen. They're there, sitting there. There is, I don't think there is a glass of beer or cider in sight at that point, because they are there very much to enjoy and participate and to watch the sport. And again, a picture taken from, that's the changing rooms for the clubhouse there, and the main stand for the rugby club. And you can see VIP tent with lots and lots of people paying extra to get in there, but also crowds on that bank watching the sport that goes on. And rugby, of course, these days is all inclusive. We don't have very many mixed games, but the ladies participate as much as anybody else. And then I think this is the final one. And again, you can't really see it, but this is after the sport has finished and into the evening, and it is much more crowded there than earlier on in the day, but nevertheless you can see that there is still quite a lot of space around. And then just a couple more general shots. That the picture that I just showed you was taken from there looking that way. So there it is. I'll just take you back to this one, if I may, for a moment. The application does include to extend basically the camping area into this bit down here. It's not intended this year that will be in use. The camping will stay where it is there. But the object of the exercise is to be able to cater for more people on site and less people commuting, if that be the right word, to and fro each day. So that's why we've extended that, and that is an area then in which people can drink, but there is no change to the actual licensed area, which stays exactly the same as it was before. So that, in essence, is the application. Mr. Rickers did invite me to comment with regard to any differences between this year and the previous licence. The answer is that I hope there are virtually none, because what I actually did was went back to the application that we submitted in 2013 and copy and pasted the entire operating schedule into the new application form, and then tweaked it. And I tweaked it in two regards. One, as has already been mentioned, with regard to the till systems. Times move on. We have automatic systems and so on in place now. Hence the revised condition there to allow that to be used, rather than have all the staff having to make manual records if for any reason they refuse a sale, because somebody can't prove that they're overage, or because somebody appears to have had one too many already. So the till can do that automatically, but with a backup of the manual system. The only other difference between the application is the conditions that came in after the hearing on the last occasion, which we agreed to and got tacked on to the end of the licence. I've moved them into the body of it so that they made a bit more sense, and I've renumbered the whole thing as well, just to try and tidy it up. But it is, to all intents and purposes, the same application, the same licence as you've got previously, other than with regard to the capacity. And as far as the capacity is concerned, I want to make one point. This is a licence. A licence allows you to do something subject to conditions, but you don't have to do it. I've got a driving licence. That does not mean that I'm not allowed to get on a bus or a train or walk, but it does mean I'm allowed to drive if I choose to do so. And the same goes here. There's been a number of suggestions, here we are yet again and so on. Well, with every will in the world, the very first tournament was held under the auspices of a licence that's actually held by the sports club itself. And that licence has always been there and is still there. In addition, this site is used for other events. Bournemouth University Students' Union has used it in previous years, as I'm sure you're aware, to hold a summer ball over in this part of the site. And that has a separate licence as well. This licence governs what we want to do and nothing else. And I've explained the reasons for making the application for a new licence as opposed to an application to vary the existing. And I don't need to go over those again. But I do want to make the point that the growth with regard to this event has been gradual and it's been organic. There hasn't been a sudden leap at any time. In terms of counting the numbers, they've always done it on the basis of the number of tickets sold. And they've kept the number of tickets sold to within or below the capacity limit that's specified on the licence, bearing in mind that on top of the tickets you've got the best part of 1,000 other people on site, working in all manner of guises: security, stewarding, officials for the matches and so on and so forth, hospitality, caterers, bar staff, you name it. So that's reduced, but the ticket sales, I set them out on page 2, it's gone from about 10,000 in 2013 to 12,000 the following year, then a very small increase to 12.5 in 2015, no increase at all in 2016, but then in 2017 a grand total of 14,000 tickets sold. Now we have a capacity limit of 15,000 on this. So if you were to knock off 1,000 people for staff and so on and so forth, then we can have another 14,000 people on site throughout the event. That's not the way it works, because whereas you do get a significant number of people buying the weekend tickets, obviously those who are glamping or camping, and a number of the competitors, not all of whom stay on site because they're local, that accounts for a fair proportion. But equally you get a number of day visitors, and I'll declare an interest. I've been on more than one occasion. I've never been for 2 days. I've been either for the Saturday or I have been for the Sunday. There is some ambition here. On each occasion that I've been, I've gone with somebody who has been rather more knowledgeable about rugby than I, who's been rather taken aback sometimes, saying, "Oh, isn't that so-and-so? He plays for London Irish," or "Hang on a minute, he plays for the international Fijian team," and so on and so forth. And what tends to happen is that people put together, I mean, other than the Army, the Navy, Air Force teams and some others, quite a lot of those who come along to compete, and particularly in the rugby, put together a team specifically for this event, and they try and include some ringers in other words, well-known international players who are there, but it's not particularly advertised. It is hoped, and it's an aspiration, and this was mentioned in the original consultation document that I sent out, that in future years we might be able to get along a couple of international sevens teams that actually play under an international flag. If that were to happen, then what is likely is that you are, particularly during the day, but not in the evening, going to get die-hard rugby fans coming along to watch these named teams play. If you think about it, the capacity of Twickenham, Cardiff Arms Park, Murrayfield, they're all around the 80,000 mark. And they're rugby fans. And I don't know if you've ever been to a rugby international at any of those venues, bearing in mind that Cardiff is slap bang in the middle of the city centre. Twickenham is slap bang in the middle of a blooming great big housing estate. And you get 80,000 people descending in one go and then going in one go. And they are a remarkably well-behaved crowd. They enjoy a drink. Of course they do. You know, rugby players, dare I say it, the netball and hockey players as well. They do all enjoy, well, not all of them, but a fair number of them do enjoy a drink, but they know how to behave. And it is only a very, very small minority that let the side down. And sometimes it's a small minority who are not even allowed in because, sorry, you've turned up, you're drunk. You turned up, you haven't got a ticket, you're not getting one, you can't walk in or anything like that, who then cause the difficulties in the locality. But part of the purpose of this is to give room for future growth. And if Mr. Woodall is successful in some of his aspirations, and there is absolutely no guarantee of that, then it would enable us to accommodate the rugby fans. You know, didn't manage to get a ticket for England Wales this year, but if you've got some teams like that there, I'd be going for the day, and I wouldn't be going for the beer, or actually it's usually cider or lager. It's not a real ale festival, I can assure you, but I would certainly be going along to watch people like that play. The concentration is very much on it being a sporting event, contrary to what is suggested. It is a very successful event. Yes, of course, it brings a lot of people to the area. Not all of them by a big margin stay on site. It does bring business and trade to the area. The local supermarket in West Parley does rather well out of it, put it mildly. Local bed and breakfasts, other campsites, local hoteliers, the taxi drivers, the bus company, because they put on shuttle buses and all the rest of it. It does bring money into the area. It helps support the sports club, including the rugby club that is based there on a permanent basis. And dare I say it, it is a good cultural thing to have. We can continue to operate, and if this application were to be refused, then there is still wriggle room, if I can call it that, within the existing licence to sell more tickets and to have more people there. But we want to be upfront with everybody. We want to be able to include this area down here as a camping area, if not for this year, but into the future, so that, as I say, we can encourage more and more people to remain on site. It continues to develop the improvements that have been made to the junction, the fact that now we don't have to get people coming all the way around here and into that car park and then out again. We can get them in and out here. Obviously, some people will want to go out through West Parley, but that's not the obvious way to go. So less congestion, better planning, and so on and so forth. I'm grateful for the written representation from West Parley in particular, because if you look at that again, it is recognised in there that this is an event that is enjoyed by a large number of people and spoilt by only a small few. And that there has been a positive dialogue. and a number of commitments made. It's on page 47 of your agenda papers. I have responded specifically to that on page 8 of the representation. In terms of things like the dedicated telephone number, we're more than happy to agree an amendment to the condition that's set out in section M towards the end, so that rather than just noise complaints, it would also be a complaints hotline for any noise, antisocial behaviour, and that we could then send out people to investigate and to try and deal with it, bearing in mind that the SIA security that are on site, the minute they walk off site, they have exactly the same rights and powers, or rather lack of power, that everybody sitting around this table is, unless one of you is a special police constable. The police are proactive with regard to this. I've given you details of the police presence and so on, but we're more than happy to agree that amended condition. I've dealt with special police services already. Discussions take place every year with regard to level of police support and so on. It is a matter for them. And as far as litter collections are concerned, that's one of the things that has been looked at, and I've highlighted the other bits in the detailed event management plan to reduce that problem. Some of what's said is anecdotal, and some of it is getting a bit historic now. Yeah, we did have a problem with some little hooligan ripping out some saplings, but that was in 2013, and that was before the application that came before other members in November 2013. It's 4 years ago. People have long memories. I'll end, if I may, unless you've got any questions to ask me or the gentleman sitting to my left, by just quoting a little bit of law at you. This is an application for a new licence, and the way in which the Licensing Act is framed is that there is a presumption in favour of grant. Unless there is a cumulative impact policy in force, which has a very different and specific meaning in licensing terms, that doesn't apply here. You know, a cumulative impact policy for a town or city centre where there are so many bars and pubs and so on that it's causing a problem, and you don't want any more. You can't point the finger at anybody in particular, so you adopt such a policy, and then there's a presumption of refusal. That is simply not the case here. There is a presumption of grant. A presumption of grant is applied for. Unless you're satisfied on an evidential basis that it's appropriate basically to do something else. Very, very little evidence has been produced before you as to the various issues that those who have taken the time and trouble, I'm grateful to them for having done it, but very little hard evidence as to what the problems are, etc. I say, as I did at the outset, that the fact that the relevant responsible authorities have not seen it appropriate to make any adverse comment, and the only two that we've had have been positive comments, particularly the one from the police. The policeman who is responsible says lowest level of crime and disorder since he's effectively been there the last 4 years. There is no evidence to the contrary, and you must deal with it on the basis of an evidential basis, but you must also deal with it in the knowledge that this is not forever. In a sense, Mr. Ricketts is absolutely right. A licence such as the one we've applied for would come into immediate effect if you were to grant it, and it lasts indefinitely. So to answer your chair's question, yes, it would apply for 2018, 19, 20, 21, etc. However, at any time, any person can apply at no cost, there's no fee to pay, for a review of the licence. And it is open to them to come along and say, look, this has happened, here's the evidence, this licensing objective has been undermined. You must not allow that to happen again. Do something. And the do something can include a whole range of things, like removing Mr. Matthew as the DPS if you think that he's not up to the job and he's incompetent or whatever. You can remove licensable activities, you can reduce the hours, you can attach conditions, you can suspend the license, or you can even revoke it and tear it up. There are one or two places where the owners of nightclubs in particular that have been rented out have taken the precaution of doing something called a shadow license. So there are two licenses in identical terms for exactly the same building. That being on the basis that if their tenants, their lessees, misbehave themselves and their license is revoked, the landlord still has one that hasn't been revoked that he can then give to somebody else to go and run it. That's not what's happening here. I absolutely assure you of that. We've applied for a new license for the specific reasons that I've set out. And it is the case that if you grant the license as we request, then I would be surrendering the old license. I make it clear, just for the record, that I wouldn't do that immediately because there is a right of appeal against any decision that you might make. And I would need to be sure that the appeal period has well and truly expired. Otherwise, worst case scenario, I could end up with no license at all. I'm not going to risk that happening. So that's effectively the application. There's a lot of information there. You've read the representations, you've read my response, you've seen the other paperwork. If there is anything further that I can say to assist, you've got any questions, then I and Mr. Matthew, Mr. Woodall, Mr. Rashurst are here to try and assist you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're now going to go on to item 4, which is a brief summary by the responsible authorities. Does either of you wish to add anything and quickly summarise what you said earlier? Councillor Phipps?
Oh, didn't know this was going to happen.
It's outlined on page
notes here because there are a few mentions.
It's outlined on page 3 of the agenda.
Sorry?
It's outlined on page 3 of the agenda.
Sorry. Just wondering what I'll do with my notes. Right, okay, there was a couple of points actually I'll just pick up on them. One in particular about Herne being less active. We used to be quite active and go to a lot of the meetings and everything, and we got to the point where nothing really changed. It was all as it was, and we still got the noise anyway, so we decided there was actually no point in going anymore.
Can I remind you, you're supposed to be summarising,
Sorry,
not
yeah, so that was
introducing you.
Well, my summary is that, yes, people were there for the sports, and we saw a lot about that, but my issue is with what the licence is for, which isn't for the sports, and we heard a lot about sports, is for the entertainment. And if they're coming and they're staying over and they want entertainment, we don't have a problem with that at all. But why can't it stop at 11 o'clock? Why does it have to go on into the early hours? And it's a noise issue. Pretty much that's it really. We saw a lot of photos about the sport, lots about the sport, but we didn't see any photos of the evening or the entertainment really, or any information about the decibel levels of the music, which is quite high. So I just bring it back to the licensing objectives, in particular the one of the public nuisance, which is where I was coming from, on the issue of getting this balance right. And I think to just keep on increasing the numbers ad infinitum, as it seems to be happening, isn't keeping a good balance for the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Manuel, did you have anything else?
I'd like to say I think we heard a lot of irrelevant information about what goes on inside the festival itself during the day. But
can I remind you, you're summarising, not criticising?
Well, not criticise, but to my mind, the focus should be on what goes on outside the event in the evening and the evening entertainment. There was reference to crimes not being reported to any extent, but I can tell you a lot of the vandalism residents do not feel, except it goes on every year, and they don't consider it worth reporting. But I can tell you that we, as the parish council, get a lot of complaints.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to item 5, which is brief summary by the applicant.
It's going to be very brief because I'm not going to repeat anything I've just said.
So we go to item 6, which is members' questions. Shall I start?
Yeah.
2 questions. What's the proportion of camping tickets versus day tickets?
Sorry, it's in here somewhere. I just need to. Players account for about 5,000 of the ticket sales at the moment. We have last year in 2017. There were 3,000 people staying in the on-site campsites. The figures are at the bottom of page 2 of my response and continuing on to the top of page 3.
Sorry, I couldn't find it earlier. My second question is regarding you said you were going to hang on to the original licence. How long is the appeal period before you are going to relinquish the original licence?
The appeal period starts when you give formal notice of the decision to everybody who has made a representation. Not everybody is here tonight, so your officers would have to write up your decision and send it out, and the clock starts ticking when they get it. You've then got 21 days to make your appeal to the Magistrates' Court. However, the Magistrates' Court is not wonderful in issuing summonses particularly quickly, and it can be a number of further weeks before you know for certain. What I try and do, if there is any prospect or any suggestion that anybody is going to appeal, we try and get in touch with them and say, is it your intention to appeal? Can you confirm that you're definitely not doing so? Quick ring, best of luck to anybody who tries doing it, to the Magistrates' Court to say, have you received any appeal with regard to this application? Leave it usually at least another week after the end of the period, and if the answer is then no, then you're pretty safe to surrender.
So there is the potential for you to run this year's event on the new licence but still have the old licence in the background without having relinquished it?
In theory, yes. In practice, no. There is absolutely no reason to do that, and there are very good financial reasons for not doing it, not least that you then have to pay the annual fees, and if the annual fees aren't paid, then Mr. Ricker sitting over there can suspend the licence so that it has no effect. So you're ending up paying double your money, which is not the name of the game at all.
Chairman, if there was a perceived threat to the licence and objectives through any practices, I, as a licensing authority, responsible authority, could even call for a review. So I don't think there's anything laid before you that's questioning that practice at this stage as being approved.
No, I was just going on the assumption that if you were to call a review on the new licence, they could still fall back on the old licence because they hadn't relinquished that because they were still waiting for the appeal period to be passed.
In theory, you're absolutely right. In practice, that I can absolutely assure you is not going to happen. And I'm aware that this is all being recorded and videoed as well.
But again, Chairman, you accept that there is that power of review, and one of those options at that stage would actually be revocation. It always comes back to the licence and objectives.
Any other questions? Councillor Hallam.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one question with regards to the evening entertainment and noise. Obviously, if you do get to the full capacity of 20,000 minus 1, then there's talk within the papers that obviously levels might go up in terms of any music or any entertainment to overcome and compensate the extra capacity. Can you just confirm whether that would likely to be the case?
I think that you need a brief explanation as to the way in which the noise monitoring works, because as has quite rightly been pointed out, this site, and it's not unique, but it is a bit unusual in that it is sensitive to weather conditions. They know full well that if it is overcast and threatening to rain, the chances of complaints plummets. But if it's a beautiful, cloudless, moonlit, peaceful evening, then the likelihood is much increased. So, and I'm oversimplifying it. The way in which it basically works is that they have monitoring points at different points of the compass. And those are all connected to various computers. The officer, your environmental health officer here, has access to all the codes and can watch what's going on at each noise monitoring point in real time, aware of what the background is. The same applies with their noise engineers and so on and so forth. So if at any particular point a problem is detected in that it is getting a bit loud here because the wind has suddenly switched, then he, i.e. the sound engineer, can control the volumes at the different places, speakers and so on and so forth. He can do that remotely from, it's a tablet, it's not even a laptop, it's sort of like an iPad type thing. And that's the way in which it works, so that it is very reactive and so on and so forth. And I think, again, if I can refer you to the comment that was made, it's on page 47 by West Parley. So the organisers have undertaken to continue, not to begin, but to continue, because they recognise it's going on, to monitor noise levels using state-of-the-art equipment and respond more positively to any complaints and maintain a log to demonstrate response times. Yeah, well, that's what happens. But it's not private to them. Your officers have immediate access to it as well. So they've then got the record as well. And they would then have the evidence to demonstrate that there was a breach, that there was a public or statutory nuisance, if that were the case.
Thank you.
Councillor Hilliard.
Please, thank you. So, obviously, with the planned increase of numbers, are you, as we saw the tents, are you laying more themed night tents to accommodate?
In terms of the accommodation and so on and so forth, the answer is no.
No, for the for the actual entertainment.
No, for the actual entertainment, there's no intention to increase the number of beer tents or entertainment tents or whatever. There is scope and capacity there already.
When I first saw it, the remote parking was the concern again last year about crossing the road, and also you mentioned, West Parley mentioned, Parley Crossroads gets heavily congested. When you advertise the event, do you indicate to come whatever, Wessex Way and then through past the airport that way? Do you steer people to a certain way?
The short answer to that is yes, but there are also various coaches and so on that are laid on to try and transport people in and out of Bournemouth, Poole and other places. It is an unfortunate fact that people tend not to use them to the extent that we would like people to use them. And yes, you can tell people until you're blue in the face, they won't always do it. But in terms of the immediate congestion problems and so on, the fact that that's been changed and that they have, the car parking used to be in here. So everybody had to come around the roundabout or around there and in here and park round there, which it did cause problems. Whereas now, the majority of people wouldn't even hit that roundabout, so you're not going to get, well, certainly would hope you're not going to get the huge tailbacks coming there. And traffic that's coming from West Parley as well ought to be flowing more freely, because they're going to come round here and then in that entrance as well, without having to cross over, because most of the people coming that way will also be going in there. It is more controllable, and there is also the option of continuing to use that car park and that entrance in any event. So it's one of these things that's dynamic. You wait to see what happens. But I mean, there is a professional company that is employed simply to deal with traffic management issues, and traffic management forms part of the event management plan. It's in one of the appendices. But again, until we know what's going to happen and what you may or may not allow, it becomes very difficult to. Well, it would be presumptuous to write a plan that assumes that you're going to give an increased capacity until you've done it.
And just linked into, you mentioned earlier about the drop-offs, because when we went there, we did notice that the drop-offs weren't that smooth, and it was as the guard didn't really believe that people were just being dropped off. They were thinking maybe we were parking. So do you communicate to the taxi firms and again in the literature to people that there is a drop-off of free? Is it free drop-off, I imagine?
The taxi drop-off is completely free. I mean, you'll always get somebody who tries to bend the rules and park where they shouldn't park and so on. So, you know, with respect, you can't blame the security and stewards for being a little sceptical on occasions. But yeah, they are given instructions and it's all publicised and so on and so forth.
And then linked to security and stewards, are they being increased by a proportionate number to accommodate the increase?
The short answer to that is probably. The security plan has not finally been written because, again, it would be presumptuous to do so. But I mean, again, I'll call a spade if I may. The security is expensive. Having an increase in capacity, bearing in mind that the base cost stays the same, gives you a lot more money to pay for enhanced security, stewarding, litter picking, and all the sort of things that local residents are concerned about. And in terms of the security patrols, yes, the draft EMP that you've got in front of you does provide already for enhanced security and enhanced litter picking. I mentioned but one of them, and that's putting somebody down here where there hasn't been anybody before, to try and deal with what appears to have been a problem. And yeah, so the short answer is yes.
That's good to hear. And then finally, it was regards to, you mentioned the campsite at the bottom, not the glamping site. Is that security managed and noise and control?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, they're all fenced off. There is a dedicated area for ladies as well, those who choose to be there. It is patrolled. It's patrolled 24 hours for fairly obvious reasons. There are restrictions in terms of what people can bring in and bring out, and somebody turning up with a ghetto blaster and playing at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's not going to last very long before there is, I was going to say, knock on the door, rap on the canvas or whatever it is.
Members happy they finished all their questions? In that case, we're going to retire to the members' room and make a decision. Thank you for your patience. Having considered all the representations made in writing and having heard in person from Herne Parish Council and West Parley Parish Council and from the applicant's solicitor, members have concluded that, having received no objections from Dorset Police or the Environmental Health Officer, the licensing objectives would not be compromised by the application. Therefore, it is agreed the application for a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 be granted, with the mandatory conditions, the conditions laid out by the applicant, and an additional condition ensuring that the final management plan includes an increase in security in litter pickers and a dedicated complaints hotline for any noise and antisocial behaviour. And with that, I conclude the meeting.